to Jonathan Taylor. Huge hole. He's at the 30. He's going to go. 10, 5, touchdown. Jonathan Taylor made a man miss the line of scrimmage and then runs it into pay dirt in a one-handed INT. Are you kidding me? Kenny Moore.
What a play by Nyheim Hines.
Horseshoe is back, baby. The horseshoe is back.
What is going on, Colts Nation? Welcome back to another episode of the Bring the Juice Colts podcast. Cody Felger here with you, Derek Larger as well. Guys, we're going to do a unique video, a little bit of an interesting video. We've never done a video like this before, but we are going to look at all the positions on the Indianapolis Colts. Originally had this as a series, but decided to just condense it down into one video, maybe a little bit longer of a video. We'll see how in-depth we get with this, but essentially we're going to be talking about all the positions, kind of looking at which positions, which players on this Indianapolis Colts roster do we think are going to be potential Pro Bowl / All-Pro selections. Now, we are going to talk about some guys who already have been there. We're going to talk about some guys who we feel like could potentially get there this season and everything in between. So we're going to start with the quarterback position, work our way all the way back to the safety position, talk about the special teams a little bit, and kind of give our thoughts on each player that we feel like has a legitimate shot. So, Derek, we'll start with the quarterback. We'll start with the only quarterback that's going to see significant time, ideally. That's Carson Wentz. And the question remains for Carson Wentz, a very polarizing figure here for, obviously Colts and Eagles fans alike here. The question is, will Carson Wentz potentially, and does he have the potential to be a Pro Bowl / All-Pro player in 2021?
I definitely believe he has the potential to reach that kind of level. Do I believe that he will reach either one of them? No, because, Carson Wentz is not a quote-unquote popular quarterback. We know how the Pro Bowl voting is, and that's a lot of times is basically a popularity contest a lot of times, which really sucks. But even on a all-pro level, DeForest Buckner didn't even get one last year, did he? Or was that the Pro Bowl?
That was Pro Bowl, yeah.
Okay, I was going to say,
All-Pro's a little bit more like they actually are legit. Like, the Pro Bowl is so stupid. Like, we know.
Yeah. You and I have said multiple times how we think it's ridiculous to even have Pro Bowls anymore. It's a shame that we used to actually use that as an accolade to tell whether or not a player was good or not. We don't do that anymore, obviously. But, so do I think he can reach an all-pro level? I believe he has the ability to do that. Do I think he will end up doing it, though? No, I don't believe so.
Yeah, 2017, obviously, he would have been considered a first-team All-Pro if he would have played in all the games, right? If he didn't get injured, I think he very well could have been the MVP. So I think, even though the Indianapolis market is not the biggest market, I do think it was a major storyline this offseason. So if Carson Wentz is one of the top quarterbacks, I could see that potentially happening. Now, the question is, will that happen? I don't think we're going to see the 2017 Carson Wentz because I think that was just an incredible year for Carson Wentz. An incredible year for a quarterback. So it's hard for me to just say, boom, yes, especially after 2020. We know where it was one of the worst quarterback seasons we've seen in a long time. It's hard for me to say, yes, he's immediately going to go back to a first or second team All-Pro. I could see, however, a guy that he's performing well and he's a Pro Bowl selection. I could very well see that for Carson Wentz. I think unless he proves us wrong, which he very well could, I just think, All-Pro probably not, but I do think Pro Bowl is very, very achievable, which is a step under, an All-Pro, but it's still a really, really good season. So I kind of think I'm right in between there. Probably Pro Bowl is kind of where I'm thinking for Carson Wentz. That's kind of his ceiling. Now, he very well could make his ceiling higher, and he could come back and completely light the league on fire. We just don't know right now. But based off of what we've seen, I think that's kind of a fair assessment of Carson Wentz there.
Mm-hmm.
All righty, let's move on to the running back position. Now, this is a very intriguing position. 3 guys that have really seen significant time in the league, significant run. Obviously Jonathan Taylor, who you drafted last year. You bring back Marlon Mack, who was an 1,000-yard rusher in 2019. Nyheim Hines has consistently been one of your best receiving threats, even as a running back, one of the best receiving running backs in the league. So I think the question remains, we'll start with Jonathan Taylor. Can Jonathan Taylor potentially be a first team, second team, all pro or a Pro Bowl type of player?
Yeah, I believe that Jonathan Taylor could end up making the all pro list. I think that if he continues to add on to what he did last year, I think he could, end up being one of the top 6, 7 rushers in the league that in yardage, and top 5 potentially in all purpose yardage. So I think that he definitely has the potential to be an all pro. As far as Marlon Mack and Naheem Hines is concerned, I don't believe that either one of them will get either of these accolades. Now, I agree with you that, Naheem Hines is one of the best receiving running backs in the league. Last year showed that. But ultimately, again, I just think when it comes to production and likability, when it comes to the overall league, I just don't think that neither one of them are going to get the recognition that's required to get those.
Yeah, I think for Marlon Mack, it may just be a lack of playing time also, just because of how much Jonathan Taylor's going to see, the first team reps and stuff like that. I just don't know if he's going to get enough to be warranted that. And then for Naheem Hines, it typically feels like the guys who are receiving backs never get enough recognition or love by, the national people or anything like that. And so receiving backs, I think, are kind of viewed as a dime a dozen. They're not viewed as much as, say, the guys that are rushing for 1,500 yards, even if they're putting up maybe similar from a yardage standpoint in rushing and receiving. For whatever reason, it just feels different from a receiving back as opposed to a back like Jonathan Taylor, who's more of a strictly a running back himself, who does primarily his damage on the ground, which is very interesting that they don't have something for more of those receiving backs. That's another topic for another video. But yeah, I definitely think you're right at the money. Even though I think both those players are very good players, I just don't know with with what I just mentioned, with the lack of playing time, and then the kind of unrecognition of what Naheem Hines has done even last year, that's going to be in the conversation. But here's an interesting group, the wide receiver group. Now, this is a very intriguing group because T.Y. Hilton's been a all-pro before. He's been a Pro Bowl player before, getting a little bit up there in age. The last couple of years, hasn't cracked 1,000 yards. He did that in 2018 with Andrew Luck, but since then hasn't done it. And, got brought back on a one-year deal. And you think potentially, okay, now you get a quarterback that has those similar traits to Andrew Luck that can throw the deep ball very, very well. Maybe that's going to bode well for T.Y. Hilton. Then you got guys like Michael Pittman Jr., who you drafted last year, who had a pretty decent rookie season. Felt like he probably could have done some things better, but, overall a solid rookie campaign to build on. You have Paris Campbell finally back, hopefully healthy for the first time in a season since being drafted. Then you have guys like Zach Pascal and just some of those other kind of back-end guys on the roster. We'll focus on those top 4 guys. Do you foresee any of these guys potentially sniffing a Pro Bowl All-Pro kind of selection?
I do actually see one of these guys potentially getting one of these accolades. Okay. I believe that Michael Pittman Jr. has the potential to be a Pro Bowl kind of wide receiver because he is a very well-known rookie wide receiver. He's very well-known amongst the entire league. Honestly, I think a lot of people from a lot of different teams know who Michael Pittman is because I think a lot of fans fell in love with him before last year even started within the draft process and everything. And I think that going into this year, he has the potential to, really shine and be able to put up those kinds of stats where I think that he might get some notice amongst the national media, no question. T.Y. Hilton, I don't see any of that happening, no matter even if he has the production to match it. Don't ever really see him getting an all-pro accolade there. We already know that, the amount of respect that T.Y. Hilton gets in the media. That people are already still calling him washed. So there's no way that happens. And, we both love Zach Pascal. I definitely think this was a guy that if, ever got the ball more often, he probably could be in that all-pro selection. I just think ultimately his usage is what holds him back even though, he's consistently up there on our team with the most touchdowns that are scored in a season. And Paris Campbell's the oddball. I think that he could earn himself an All-Pro if indeed he puts up the numbers that we've been declaring him to get. Does he get those, though? I'm not sure. It's just way too crazy for me to think that he gets anything there. And of course, I don't think he's getting a Pro Bowl at all either, because I just don't see the popularity with him right now. I mean, everybody's already said their piece about Paris Campbell outside of our podcast. So, MPJ, I look for him to probably represent the wide receiver class when it comes to these accolades.
Mm-hmm. So what would a stat line look for MPJ? Say he's a Pro Bowl type of receiver. What kind of production are you looking for in year number 2?
Well, I mean, I gotta see at least 60 plus receptions. I gotta see a guy with 900 to 1,100 yards potentially, and a guy that is going to be in that 8 to 9 touchdown region. I think that's probably what I'm going to be looking for, to see if he can get into that kind of accolade there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Sounds good. Now, the tight ends are a very interesting group as well, because you got a combination of veteran experience, physical freakness, and rookie guy that we think can extend the field in Kylan Granson. Now, out of any of these guys, do you think any of these guys have a chance here to potentially be one of these Pro Bowl / All-Pro type of guys?
I do not believe so. With as small as the window is with elite tight end talent, those same guys almost always are going to get in there. I still look to see what Kylan Granson can do and see if he provides something that we haven't seen very often amongst a Colts tight end, something along the line of a guy like Travis Kelce, who can extend the field like he does. But, until that happens, I don't see it for right now. We obviously know Jack Doyle's not getting anything there. God bless his soul on that one, but he's a hard worker. I don't think that those really matter to him. He does the dirty work anyway. Mo Alley Cox, I would love to see Mo Alley Cox do something there, but I just don't see it happening with him either. This whole tight end group is so spread out. I just don't know if I could see it.
Yeah, with you mentioned, with just there's not as many tight ends that make the Pro Bowl compared to even wide receivers. And with the way the Colts like to spread it around, I mean, they had all 3 of their tight ends had like 30 receptions last year, just the way the Colts like to spread the ball around. I could see that. And it's not like they have a tight end that they drafted in rounds 1 or 2 like they did with wide receivers. So I think for that reason, the tight end room, I think it's a solid group, but I don't know if they have that guy at tight end. All right, let's move on to the offensive line, the bread and butter of this Indianapolis offense. I mean, this group has been one of the best in the league the last couple of years. And now they replace Anthony Costanzo, who retired, obviously. And, they signed Eric Fisher in the offseason, who former number 1 overall pick, I believe in 2013 it was. So they add to an already really good offensive line, a guy that's been to the Pro Bowl before, that's had some accolades before. It's been one of the top players at his position. But, Derek, he's coming off of an injury that is significant, right? With that Achilles injury he suffered in the playoffs. And so this is going to be a very interesting group, I think, to kind of see, especially at left tackle. We kind of have a good feeling about the other positions, but left tackle is a big question mark. But as far as Pro Bowl / All-Pro players, I feel like there's a lot of guys that could potentially be candidates for those accolades. What are your thoughts on the offensive line?
Well, I believe that Quentin Nelson and Ryan Kelly are going to repeat as, Pro Bowl favorites for this team. We've seen them go to the Pro Bowl together, both of them, top 5 at their position each way. I mean, probably top 3 if you want to include Ryan Kelly in the top 3, which I do. And then I believe both of them can be all pros at their position. I am much less concerned about Quentin Nelson as I am Ryan Kelly. Ryan Kelly just started off so slow last year and had a few injuries that kind of hurt him that really hurt his performance early on in the year, but everybody knows Big Q. The one that is still irks me to this day, we talked about it over this offseason multiple times, and I will continue to say it. Braden Smith is, again, the most underrated offensive lineman in the league, and he should be an all-pro this year if he puts up anything similar to what he did last year. Again, I remind everyone, he was the only tackle in the NFL last year in the season of 2020 to not allow a sack after a certain minimum amount of snaps. The only one. And yet that person did not get an all-pro. I don't understand. I don't understand the criteria anymore for all-pros. It made me, to be quite honest with you, it kind of gave me a sense of not trusting the all-pro system anymore either. Like, how does the one guy that didn't allow a sack all year, why is that guy not on the all-pro list? Like, he did the one thing that nobody else in the league did. Like, in the all-pro is supposed to be the best of the best. Like, Braden Smith was the best of the best last year. And if he's anything like that this year, should win it again. But, he probably won't because, he's overshadowed by Quentin Nelson and Ryan Kelly to no fault of his own.
It's crazy, though, because you feel like realistically, if you look at this group, if they're all healthy and they're all playing up to their potential, you feel like the Colts could potentially, and again, we'll see obviously with how the Colts get disrespected in the national media. I mean, the Colts potentially could have four of their five offensive linemen be Pro Bowl, all pro type of players. They have that capability, which is absolutely crazy. And, you've talked about Mark Glowinski. I mean, he's a good player too. So their offensive line is absolutely insane with how much talent they have and how good this group is. And I think just adding another player like Eric Fisher just elevates this offensive line to another level, if indeed he can come back 100% from that Achilles injury, hopefully sooner rather than later into the season. So very good group there. All right, let's move on to the other side of the football. Let's move on to the defensive line for Indianapolis. The last 2 years, it's really been retooled by Chris Ballard and company, trading for DeForest Buckner, 13th overall pick in 2020. They get him. He's a first-team All-Pro type of player. He's phenomenal. He leads the Colts with 9.5 sacks. And you pair him with Grover Stewart, who they just extended this last season, I should say, midseason. And you have a really, really good pairing on that interior. Now, the biggest fault of this Colts defense, especially on the defensive line, was the edge group, right? Solid group, but nothing spectacular. You felt like you needed to improve somehow. You need to be able to get consistent pressure from the edge. When you rush four, you feel confident about it. What do the Colts do? They go out, they re-sign a few of their own. They draft Kwity Paye in the first round, draft Dayo Odengbo in the second round, and they really start retooling that defensive end group. But it's still a very young group on the edge, a lot of unproven talent right now. But what are your overall thoughts on this defensive line group as a whole?
Yeah, I think that really the only name that really stands out here as a chance to be that all-pro, Pro Bowl type of talent is DeForest Buckner. I mean, that's the fallback option here. Yeah. What does Kwity Paye do throughout the season? I'm not sure. Does Kwity Paye, become that new sack legend that we're looking at right off the bat? I don't know. I doubt it because, I've been, just like the rest of Colts Nation, excited to see this kid develop, but I've been a little bit more realistic in how I feel that he will approach this year. I just felt that his sack numbers were going to be too low for him to get any kind of severe recognition amongst the media. So DeForest Buckner right here for this defensive line group is the only one that I could see getting that Pro Bowl and All-Pro kind of recognition, even though he didn't get Pro Bowl last year for some weird reason.
It's interesting. If Braden Smith is the most underrated offensive lineman, I think Grover Stewart is one of the most underrated defensive linemen in the league. I mean, this guy consistently is one of the best run stoppers in the league. He's consistently one of the better one techniques in the league, and he's got no recognition for it. It's absolutely insane. Some people still don't know who Grover Stewart is, despite the fact that he's one of the more disruptive one techs in the league. And I feel like those two guys in particular, they play at all Pro Bowl levels, and they just don't get the recognition for it. So if somehow they start getting recognized, I think they have a really good shot as well. Now, I'm not going to hold my breath because of the national media, but they are the type of players that you think could potentially, if they were on, say, the Dallas Cowboys or one of those big teams, they would get more nationally recognized. They could be right there, Pro Bowl type of players. Absolutely.
Yeah.
All righty, let's move on to the linebackers now. Darius Leonard, we know he's been an All-Pro. He's been a Pro Bowler. He's been consistently one of the best linebackers in football. We just did, obviously, our look at the linebackers, talked all about Darius Leonard, how good he is, how much he means to this Colts defense. And then you got Bobby Okereke, who is very much a wild card in this Colts linebacker room. You feel really good about him. You just don't know how much he's going to ascend here in year number 3. If you have a feeling it's going to be good, but you don't know, especially with Anthony Walker leaving in free agency, going to Cleveland. Now, Mike linebacker is Okereke's for the taking. He has the opportunity to really take that and secure that Mike linebacker for the near future. Now, he had a really, really good rookie season, a pretty good sophomore season. Not as good, I think, as people expected or hoped. Didn't make the leap like Akari Willis did potentially in year number 2, but he's still a really good linebacker. And you feel like there's things that he's going to learn now, being now another offseason in this Colts defense. You feel like the sky's pointing up and the arrow's pointing up for a guy like Okereke to potentially sniff that Pro Bowl type of level. What are your thoughts on these linebackers?
Yeah, I mean, for Darius Leonard, it's still to this day, I'm still salty about how in 2019 he was second team All-Pro and not first team, despite the fact that he missed 3 games. I still don't understand it. I mean, even after missing 3 games, was still one of the top 27 tacklers in the league. And not to mention, when you looked at his numbers and what he provided for them, I mean, ultimately, he had 9, I think I'm going to look at this. Yeah, he had 5 interceptions that year, 2 forced fumbles, and 5 sacks while missing 3 games. He had 7 turnovers in 2019 and did not get selected to a first-team All-Pro. I get he missed 3 games, but he was still a top 30 tackler in the league. He led all linebackers in turnovers and scored a touchdown. I just didn't understand. I'm sure it probably had something to do with the fact that his team was not very good that year. That might have had something to do with it, but that's not how it should be. It should be about performance. And when you're a top 30 tackler in the league, even after missing 3 games, you had 7 turnovers, forced turnovers. You had 1 touchdown. You had 5 sacks as a linebacker. Okay, you should be a first-team All-Pro because there were still not more than 5 linebackers in the league that were better than Darius Leonard was in 2019, despite missing all those games. So that still makes me really salty that he didn't make it, but he did make it to the Pro Bowl that year, made it to the Pro Bowl this last year, and made the first-team All-Pro. I expect it to be the same thing here. I expect both of these. To be quite honest with you, I think he might have the potential to lose that Pro Bowl spot, if I'm not mistaken. You know, I think that, I mean, it was taken away from him in 2018. I still don't know to this day how you could lead the league in tackles and still not get selected to the Pro Bowl, but that's beyond me. But yeah, I mean, I would much rather him lose his Pro Bowl selection than lose a first-team All-Pro. That's what I care more about for Darius Leonard than, you know, the stupid Pro Bowl.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and as far as Bobby Okereke goes, what are your thoughts on him as well?
I mean, I definitely look for him to improve this year. I think he's, again, going to get more snaps, and that's good for him. You know, he's going to hope to have a resurgence this year. Don't expect him to get a Pro Bowl of any kind. Could see him getting a second-team All-Pro kind of listing here. I don't see him as first team, at least not yet. I think he still has a little bit more to learn, but, you know, has that potential in the future. But right now, I think he just has a little bit more to go.
Yeah, but I think you want gradual improvement from him, which I think we're pretty confident we're going to see here in year number 3. But if he can get near that level, I mean, that's a big win for the Colts linebackers moving forward. All right, let's move now to the secondary. Let's start with the corners. Let's talk about Xavier Rhodes, one of the best corners in football last year. was phenomenal in his resurgence coming to Indianapolis after spending years and years in Minnesota and struggling mightily the last couple of years in Minnesota. He comes in on a 1-year deal, has a really good season, gets re-signed by Indianapolis this past offseason. And then you got guys like Rock Ya-Sin, who's still up and down, up in the air. You have guys like Kenny Moore, who we can firmly say is the best slot corner in football, in our opinion. And then you got a lot of other guys like Marvell Tell, Isaiah Rodgers, who kind of are in the back end of that roster there and potentially competing for that number 2 corner spot alongside of Rock Ya-Sin. But as far as the guys that we know, Derek, we'll primarily stick with Xavier Rhodes and Kenny Moore. Do you think these two guys have a chance to be Pro Bowl All-Pro players in 2021?
It's quite shocking, to look at this secondary and to see, the amount of disrespect that they still get, even after, a couple of really good players are doing what they do. I mean, Xavier Rhodes, I really thought should have gotten some kind of accolade last year. I thought he was a top 10 corner in the league last year, outside corner in the league. I mean, even for his own corner and for, all the doubts that people had against him, I think it's just when he started the year out, he had those 2 interceptions and it looked like he was going to ride high, but, just failed to get any interceptions afterwards. And that's kind of what hurt him. I hope that he, will improve on that even more. But, again, the level of disrespect that Kenny Moore continues to get from just everybody. I mean, it's really incredible just that this guy is the best slot corner in all of football. He's about to be 26. Last year, played in all 16 games, had 4 interceptions, more than any slot corner in the league, had a touchdown on top of that, and had 13 pass deflections. 13. That's a career high. Had a forced fumble, had 2 sacks, had 80 combined tackles. I'm just finding it hard to believe that, a slot corner that's putting up the numbers that he does just continues to not get any recognition. And, we remember his 2018 year, where he was playing really well, had 3 interceptions that year as well, and a forced fumble, had 1.5 sacks. We all remember the sack that he put on Deshaun Watson that year that helped us win that game, had 77 combined tackles. It's just, I just still to this day don't understand. And there's people that still don't even know Kenny Moore's on our roster. I mean, this offseason, we saw a guy on CBS break down the Colts secondary group and failed to even mention Kenny Moore. Didn't even know he was on the roster. Like, what is that? So it really upsets me. I hope that Kenny Moore continues to do what he does this year. And I hope he gets the recognition, because if he does, he finally could get that first team All-Pro or a Pro Bowl selection. I think he definitely could get one. As far as the rest of these kids go, Julian Blackmon to me has the potential for a Pro Bowl selection when you look at, just the big play ability of this guy. I think that's what it is. I think that's what he has over Khari Willis. Khari Willis is more of the down and dirty kind of safety, which is exactly what you want in a strong safety. Doesn't make quite as many dramatic plays as Julian Blackmon that everyone sees and just doesn't understand and appreciate it. So I don't anticipate Khari Willis getting anything, unfortunately. Despite last year was a really, really good year for him. And Julian Blackmon, I could see maybe getting a Pro Bowl selection because of popularity-wise. But outside of that, I don't see much more out of this secondary group right now.
Yeah, Julian Blackmon was a revelation, man, last year. Coming in, being drafted in the 3rd round. Some people thought he might not even play much in 2020. He comes in, doesn't miss a beat, man. He's playing not even fully 100% and doing those kind of things. So you have to wonder, now that he's 100%, now that he's got his legs back to where they want, he talked about at the end of the year how his legs were giving out near the end of that season. You have to wonder, if he was doing that injured, how much better is he going to be now fully healthy? And I think that's a big question that I have is like, we've only scratched the surface, I think, on what Julian Blackmon can do, man.
And a full off season to actually be able
Yes.
to be in the building. So
Yes, that's a factor that a lot of people don't really consider as much as I think they should. Like these rookies, how great they were last year. We're talking about, you know, the Jonathan Taylor, Michael Pittman, Julian Blackmon, just to name a few. They had virtually no offseason work, and they did what they did last year. And that's incredible. That's why I feel like all three of those guys have potential to be Pro Bowl, All-Pro kind of players because they were doing that as rookies with virtually no experience in the NFL. So, yeah, having a full offseason, man, I think Julian Blackmon can even elevate his game even more. And he'll be more consistent, I think, with not having to, you know, have the recovery time that he had, not having to play not 100%. Now that he is, I mean, it's going to be exciting to see what he can potentially bring. I think he has all-pro potential here. I really do. I think he has that. Just that it factor. He has that knack for making a big play when needed. And that's exactly what this Indianapolis defense is predicated on. It kind of reminded me in certain ways, Derek, obviously it was a little bit different, but how Darius Leonard, his rookie season was just, and it continues to be, just a guy that forces those key turnovers when needed. That's exactly what Julian Blackmon does. And it's exciting to see what he's going to do in year number 2, along with Corey Willis, who I think is one of the most underrated strong safeties in the league also. I think there's a lot of potential in this group as well. And a lot of people point to this group and say, I'm really concerned about the secondary. And I'm like, outside of number 2 corner, I think the Colts are pretty good with their secondary right now.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's move on to the last group here, the specialists, right? We'll talk about Rodrigo and Rigoberto. Both these guys, very good last year for their respective positions. I would say Hot Rod out of any of them struggled a little bit down the stretch, especially from longer distances. But, you know, he seems like he's putting in the work, wants to get better, wants to improve. And from all what we've heard in minicamp and stuff like that, he was nailing 50-plus yarders. So seems like a guy he had a really, I mean, I think he broke the scoring record for the Colts or something like that in his rookie year. So a lot of people like to trash on him, but I'm like, look, he just broke a record as a rookie, undrafted rookie. And I think he's only going to get better. He's going to have to compete, obviously, for a spot with Eddie Pinheiro, but I don't foresee that being an issue. And then obviously Rigoberto now coming off, you know, had that cancerous tumor and came back and was still an absolute monster and a punter. So I think from a specialist standpoint with those two guys, then you have some of your returners in Nyheim Hines, Isaiah Rodgers. Do you see any of these guys potentially being Pro Bowl All-Pro players?
Well, I don't anticipate any of these guys being Pro Bowlers when it comes to these stats, unfortunately. When we're talking about All-Pros, you know, George Odom was an All-Pro last year with the specialist, and, you know, the amount of tackles he made and the big plays that he made on special teams. I'll throw out another name that I think could potentially sneak his way in the same regard as what George Odom did the previous year. And that's Jordan Glasgow. I think Glasgow has that potential on the special teams to be a guy who can get that kind of recognition because I really like his fire. I like the way he plays special teams. I really like what I see in him. In regards to Blankenship and Sanchez, you know, Blankenship, love the guy. Think that he's going to be I think he's going to take a step forward on this year, being more accurate, being more consistent down the stretch. But other than that, I don't think he's really going to be an All-Pro at anything for that matter. Sanchez, I'm quite surprised as a punter himself that he's not been an All-Pro at any point when it comes to being a punter. I mean, you know, he's been ever since Pat McAfee left. I mean, I'm going to be completely honest. I think Sanchez has been one of the best punters in the league, you know, one of the most accurate punters in the league. I mean, this last year, his yards per punt was the highest that we've seen in his career. And, you know, we remember the 2 games that he missed because what was that tumor that he had to get taken out of him and still played 2 weeks later. I mean, that's quite incredible. But other than that, you know, I mean, I really don't see much else from this group. So,
yeah, I mean, I think the beauty with this group is I think they all have the potential to be. I'm not going to say they are because there's a lot of good kickers and punters in there, a lot of good specialists in there. It seems like out of all the positions now, not everybody, but it seems like there's a lot of guys that are really locked in and have refined their craft and are really, really good at their position. So for us to say, I don't know if they're going to make a Pro Bowl or All-Pro, it's not a slant against them. It's just how good some specialists can be. Those top specialists, man, they are incredible at their job. So I think for that reason, yeah, I agree with you there. But all right, well, that'll do it, I think, for our look here at all the position groups, talking about, all right, which guys do we think potentially could be Pro Bowl, All-Pro players? Let us know what you guys think. Do you agree with us? Are there players that we missed that you think potentially half Pro Bowl, All-Pro level? Are there players we mentioned you're like, I don't know if they're going to be that? Let us know in the comments below. For Derek and myself, that'll do it for this one, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. And as always, go Colts.